Hi, I'm Michael Coker, a personal injury lawyer in Georgia, and I'm going to talk to you today about what are called static defect cases. If that doesn't mean anything to you or you have no idea what I'm talking about, it basically means that you trip and fall on some defect on the property. And this happens all the time in retail stores, department stores. And so if that's happened to you, you definitely want to stay tuned and watch this video. If you've fallen or tripped over something in a store, you might be wondering whether or not you have a case. Well, these cases are called static defect cases, and static defect cases are basically where there's something on the property that's a defect or a hazard that makes it dangerous for the customers. Now, this doesn't always mean a static defect could be, say, a puddle of water that maybe is there because someone had a spill, but typically those cases are a little bit different. Static defect cases involved a situation where maybe there's a piece of carpet that's ripped and it's exposed something, or maybe there's a curb that kind of falls off and it's not painted yellow, or maybe there's another item that you trip over that's maybe something across the ground. These things are called static defect cases, and in most states, there's things called building codes that prevent these static defects. You see, obviously when these building codes are created, the number one thing that matters the most is the safety of the customers that are going to come to that building. And so it's really important that when these stores are built, that they basically put things in place that are not trip hazards, that don't often cause people to fall. And so one of the things that happens often in these type of cases is when you have these static defects, often they are violations of some sort of building code. And that alone can establish your liability and the company's responsibility for a case. Now, how do you know if you have a case if you tripped and fell on a static defect? The only way to know for sure is to talk to a lawyer who understands different types of static defect cases. I've done dozens of these over my career, and no two cases the same. I've had people trip over parking curb stops, right? Those things that when you pull your car forward and they stop the tires before you hit a building. I've had people trip over buckles or rolls in a carpet. I've had people trip over transitions between tile and carpet where there's gaps or holes. I've had people trip over tiles that have broken or cracked that are not repaired. The only way to know whether or not your static defect rises to the level that's high enough for you to have a case is to talk to an attorney who understands these cases. And I'm going to let you in on a little industry secret. Even as an attorney, I don't understand all the building codes and all the static defects, but I have a basically staff of experts that I can call on at any given time that basically I can say, hey, is this an issue? Is this a static defect? Is this a violation of building codes? And these engineers and building planners can look at the codes and say, yes, Michael, it is, or no, it's not. And so even though I've done dozens of cases, I still have to rely on these experts and reach out to them. And so if you're calling an attorney to ask if you have a case, the first thing you need to know is whether they've worked with these experts, these engineers prior. Do they have enough information or enough contacts that they can tell you whether or not that static defect is a problem and whether or not you have a case? The other thing that I always recommend to people if they're injured on a static defect is to take a picture, because I would almost venture to say 99% of the time, after you trip and fall over the item, the store or the restaurant usually fixes the problem. And once it's fixed, that's usually the end of it. And that could be a huge problem if you're trying to win your case, because now we're trying to rely on your memory and your description of the item versus having a photograph that basically shows it. And so if you trip, if you're in a store, this is a good practice pointer for you. If you or someone you love's in a store and they trip and fall, grab your cell phone, take a couple pictures of the thing that that person fell on or the thing that caused them to fall. Because without that, it might be really hard for you to prove your case. One, because it'll probably be repaired within the next 24 to 48 hours. And two, Having a photograph allows us to give that photograph to one of these experts and to say, hey, is this a violation of a building code? Is this something that should have been fixed? So we can advise you as to whether or not you have a case. The second thing I will say is you need to call a lawyer immediately, because in this day and age, surveillance cameras are everywhere. They're so pervasive. They're on every corner of every building. They cover every part of a store. And so the odds are that your trip and fall was likely caught on video. And so only an experienced attorney who understands how to preserve these videos is going to be able to protect you and your case by making sure that video is not destroyed. And in Georgia, for example, we have a certain process that we go through, a certain letter that we can send that requires the store to preserve the video because litigation is imminent. If you don't send that letter and you don't do what you need to do to protect your case immediately through an attorney, that video could be gone and you could completely lose your case just because the evidence was not preserved. And so I recommend you call an attorney immediately. Make sure that evidence is preserved. Make sure you have the photographs. Make sure everything's protected prior to it being destroyed. If you would like more information about static defect cases, you can always call our office. We're happy to give you some information to tell you whether or not you have a case. And even if your case did not happen in Georgia, we can connect you with lawyers in your state that could be able to help you. And so don't try to navigate this one alone. Corporations and stores have extremely high-powered attorneys that are paid a lot of money to make sure that they sink or ruin your case. And so be sure you have a strong advocate that can go up against the insurance companies and these high-powered attorneys and their corporations to make sure that you get your medical bills paid, that the time you miss from work is covered, and ultimately you get something for the suffering that you had to endure. If I can help you, obviously feel free to give me a call. I'm more than happy. We do free consultations to talk to you about the case. And if you like getting these updates, obviously like and subscribe to this podcast. We'll keep rolling them out and giving the public free legal information. But until next time, stay safe out there, and thanks for watching.